Welcome to the Alex Salmond Show in the aftermath of the European elections in the UK. At first sight, all seems to have changed and changed utterly. However, today we examine whether the underlying political tectonic plates have really shifted. It certainly has been quite a week.
I will shortly leave the job that it has been the honour of my life to hold.
In this show, we survey that turbulent political landscape. We talk to some of the winners.
This is a big message, big wake-up call to Westminster. Will they listen?
And those who won their own seats amid carnage for their party.
And yes, we took a kicking, but it's not quite the sweet people thought.
We look at some of the immediate consequences and some of the medium-term ones.
Our purpose is India Ref 2, a second independence referendum. That is a mandate that the SNP are elected on.
So all of that to look forward to today. But first, your tweets, messages and emails in response to Alex's interview with Mick Fealty of Sluggo O'Toole blog fame. Robert says, another interesting Alex Salmond interview. I've missed the regular show on RT since swapping from Sky to Virgin. Well, no need to worry, Robert. You can actually watch the show online on RT and also on Alex's Facebook page every week. David says, very simply, love your shows. Brid says, good to see Scotland and Northern Ireland talking together. John says, I honestly think the biggest reason unionists struggle with their voice is because being heard is hard. First, start with an apology to non-unionists that have suffered because of it. Marches and backwards mentalities need to be called out on both sides. John goes on to say, both sides need equality. That won't happen until both sides forgive each other and know that equal treatment in either cleaning the slate or charging everyone on both sides happens. Even before the votes were counted, the Brexit Party breakthrough was having an impact. The Prime Minister was gone, or at least going, and the opposition Labour Party were also licking their wounds. Alex speaks to independent MEP and Brexit campaigner Stephen Wolfe.
Now, Stephen Wolfe joins me from Brussels. Stephen, you'll be celebrating the success of the Brexit Party. How much would you say that's due to the popular feeling about the failure of Westminster to deliver Brexit? On the other hand, how much is it due to the personality of Nigel Farage?
I think there's a combination of both. The British people aren't stupid. They are very angry and upset, particularly in the north of England, the Midlands and Wales, where you saw increasing votes, but surprisingly also in the southwest of England and in London. And of course, you need to have somebody that they can fix on, someone with a personality, a character, and has a very clear message. And there's no one better in the political business in Britain at the moment than Nigel Farage in expressing that single message. Democracy is failing if Brexit is not there. Give us Brexit, therefore vote for the Brexit Party. And it's worked once again.
Now, your tanks are now well and truly parked in Westminster lawn. What's your message to the MPs at Westminster as they look again at the Brexit legislation under a new Prime Minister?
I think many of them, both on the Labour left and in the Conservative Party, will be self-interested. They'll be looking at their own seats. If you're a Labour MP in the north of England that have now seen your seats lost in council elections and the numbers of people voting for the Brexit Party, then you'll be worried that if you don't deliver Brexit, which is a no-deal Brexit, as most people want, they will lose their seats in the next general election. If you're a Conservative MP, then you'll know that you'll be out of power for a generation. So they've got some really hard thinking to do. And the reality is the next Prime Minister, the next Conservative leader, I think must just be very tough and say, let's go for Brexit with no deal. Let's get rid of the withdrawal agreement and dare any MP to challenge them on the other side.
Doesn't the success of the Brexit Party cause its own difficulties in terms of UK politics? If you look at a map after the European elections, then certainly just about all of England, bar London, is coloured the Brexit Party's light blue. But the map of Scotland is entirely the SNP's yellow. Haven't you instigated the division of the UK as you're trying to get the UK out of Europe?
No, I think the division in the UK has always been there with the SNP. And look, I've argued in the past, it's a perfectly acceptable argument and political debate for the SNP to say we wish to be an independent nation. And I have no problems with that. But I do believe that there is a number of people in Scotland, and that's why you saw again them winning a seat there with an increased number of votes, I believe, that want to remain part of the Union but also leave the European Union. So I don't think the divisions were cause of Brexit. They're just giving a voice to those people that want to leave the European Union and stay in the Union. And I think that's quite legitimate too.
Now, Stephen Wolfe, if I could end with a personal question. You're leaving Brussels as an MEP. Are your own sights set now in a Westminster seat?
I've always said that I didn't want to stand in this European election, that I felt that the next phase of the libertarian freedom movement, bringing democracy back to the people, would be in national elections. I'd love to stand in a seat. I'd like to take on one of those Labour MPs in a Leave area that has voted to remain. And I would like those people that have a voice that backs them, their vision. And I'd hope to do so with the Brexit Party. I am a registered supporter. But of course, there are many talented people out there. And I would have to fight for my seat just like everybody else.
Stephen Wolfe in Brussels, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
So the Brexit Party breakthrough was the final straw for Theresa May. But Labour were also on the receiving end of an electoral drubbing. However, safely back on top of the London list was Claude Moraes. Alex spoke to him about lessons from the election and where now for Labour.
Well, Claude Moraes, re-elected for a fifth term in the European Parliament. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
But your party, Labour, took a bit of a drubbing. What was the key reason for that?
No, we did. We got a kicking, and I think the key reason was we are one of the big parties of government, but also we were squeezed by the Lib Dems and Remain parties because we had a policy of trying to unite the country. The whole issue about a confirmatory vote. But that was seen as, trying to hedge our bets, a sequence. I mean, I actually believe in the end, Labour will be a key part of getting to a confirmatory vote. And you can see that our front bench are saying that now. But clearly within the election, that was one of the factors that really lost us some of our MEPs.
Now, for you as the lead London member, the shift to a referendum or a confirmatory vote or a second ballot, it's a pretty simple calculation. It makes obvious politics. But let's say you were an MP in one of the Leave areas in the north of England. Would matters be quite as simple?
This is why I think we had the policy of uniting the country. We've got these Leave areas, Leave MPs, Lisa Nandy, these kind of voices. But I think in the end, Alex, we're going to have to come down off the fence onto one kind of policy, because the existential crisis for October the 31st is a no deal with a hard right Conservative Prime Minister, potentially. And to stop this and to create the situation for the people we represent, I really believe that we have to emphasise now the Remain kind of confirmatory vote aspect. I know that that is not a perfect situation. I know that that will be risky for some of our Remain supporters, but I do believe that this is the direction of travel, and that's what I support, with the risks inherent in it.
So we've got the Farage tanks parked in the lawn outside the House of Commons. The Tory party convulsed by a leadership election, but the Labour Party's convulsed as well. I mean, was this the right time to be expelling Alistair Campbell?
Yeah, I mean, those are our rules, but you're right, it's about the interpretation of the rules. I've been around in the party a long time. He did say this after the polls were closed. Was it the right thing to do? I mean, Alistair's right to appeal this because other Labour Party members will have done this, but did they leave a paper trail? Did they actually say it publicly? So he left himself vulnerable, but I think there will be a lot of people sympathetic, not necessarily supporters of his, by the way, but just Labour Party members, because they may have done the same. Do I support him doing that? No, I don't, because obviously I lost many colleagues by people voting Lib Dem, so I make that very clear. And we have our rules, but there is something there, and I guess, he has to appeal this.
Now, let's look pan-European. You're one of the most distinguished chairs of a key European committee, but both the centre-right and indeed the centre-left took a bit of a dunt in the elections. I mean, are things just going to roll on as before in the European Parliament, or are there going to be other voices heard in key decision making?
I think the reality check, Alex, was that it wasn't a sweep for the populist parties that we had feared. It wasn't, you know, a complete kicking for the centre. The centre did hold, and that is gratifying. You can't be complacent about it. But of course, the centre reduced. So these big parties, the European People's Party, my Socialists and Democrats, and that is a huge warning signal. But what you got is a real fragmentation, massive increase in the Greens, massive increase. The far left, of course, increasing too. So what we have to do with that is not just stand around. We've got to figure out how to deal with this. I mean, populism is quite something. I mean, it's not easy to respond to. I mean, things like, I deal with migration and so on. Making the positive case is not enough. I mean, this is people now reacting very strongly, sometimes not in the way that you think. It's a proxy thing sometimes. So, you know, we have to be on our game now. And yes, we took a kicking, but it's not quite the sweep people thought.
And when you see the confusion, the anti-Europeanism in English politics, do you ever hanker to be back home in Scotland and representing a more pro-European country? I
mean, I loved growing up in Scotland, and it doesn't surprise me how the temperature and the pro-European nature of it. I was a Scots lawyer. It was the Old Alliance. When I did my Scottish law, we never saw it as anything other as a link with internationalism and the rest of the EU. So it doesn't surprise me that Scotland has taken this pro-European internationalist view. And, you know, that's the essence of what I loved growing up there. And, I take that as part of my makeup now. I want that for everyone. I want that kind of attitude for everyone. I'm an internationalist, Alex, that's it. You know, and you have to keep fighting. The previous question you asked me about, is all of this inevitable? You know, in Denmark, the Danish People's Party were out. In Finland, they expected the far right to succeed, but they didn't. The Greens did. Politics is the art of what is possible. And we have to keep fighting for our internationalist and progressive ideals. So it's doable.
Well, Claude, next time you get back to Dundee on a visit, why don't you take the Alex Salmond Quake with you? Whiskey in the Quake. I don't have to tell a Dundee boy what to do with this.
Thanks very much, Alex. I'm one guest that will know how to use this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
And so both Tory and Labour have been left in degrees of disarray. But what of the other parties? Does the Lib Dems' performance signal a revival of the centre? Or does the eclipse of the Tiggers or independent group or Change UK actually kill realignment stone dead? And what of Scotland and indeed Ireland? Join us after the break to find out. Welcome back. The only area of the mainland where the Brexit Party did not top the Europoll was Scotland, where the SNP still reigns supreme. But even in Scotland, the Brexit Party claimed second place and a seat. Alex speaks to senior SNP MP Angus MacNeil on how Scotland should respond to Brexit Party England.
Angus, I was expecting a Hebridean backcloth. You're in your kitchen.
Well, I wanted to be certain about the Wi-Fi, and the most certain I could get for RT is in my kitchen. So I can just say the scenery outside the windows is absolutely gorgeous. The kitchen, meanwhile, will have to make do.
But you must be pretty chuffed. I mean, the whole map of Scotland is coloured yellow after the European elections, everywhere from Barra to the border. So you must be feeling pretty happy about the Euro election results.
Yeah, the results went really well for the SNP. It's the biggest share of the vote of any party in Western Europe. It follows the springboard of the First Minister announcing that she was going to put legislation through the Scottish Parliament for holding a referendum. It's time now to have the independence campaign and move on to Scotland.
Now, Angus MacNeil, the SNP seemed to be anticipating that a Boris Johnson premiership would boost the support for independence. But what happens if he becomes Prime Minister and turns out to be a success? Or alternatively, the Tories might choose someone else?
Well, I think back in planet Earth, the prospect of Boris being a success isn't a real prospect at all. The problem the Tories have got is maintaining the trade links, maintaining the border and the no border in Ireland, and getting out of the customs union and the single market, which they are fanatically wedded to. So ultimately, the Tories have got a bottom line problem, regardless who's in power. And that is what's going to be damaging for Scotland, is that fanaticism that is at the root of the Tory party, that fantasy that's pushing them on at the moment. And that is why we have to get on with it. We know which direction they want to go, and we know which direction we want to go. They're two different directions, so let them go their way, and let us go our way.
But as you know well, Angus McNeill, politics is always changing. Jeremy Corbyn could shift towards a people's vote. The Tory party are electing a new leader. You don't expect this Westminster disarray to continue indefinitely.
Whatever happens in Westminster or with Corbyn or whoever, that should be a secondary matter. We've got to get on with our purpose. Our purpose is India Ref 2, a second independence referendum. That is a mandate that the SNP are elected on. It's a mandate now in the Scottish Parliament with the Greens. There's a majority for that. Let's get on, let's make the argument to the people. Let's not be afraid to lead, because when we lead, as we saw the last time, we put on 17% in the polls. And this time we're only needing to put on 2 or 3% and we'll win. I think things will continue to muddle on as they've been for the last 4 to 5 months. They'll hope to get to October and get another sticking plaster. They will waste the time that Donald Tusk warned them not to waste. So I think it's going to be more muddle, disarray and confusion from Westminster, given all the threats, as you've mentioned, they have around them.
Angus McNeill from his kitchen in the beautiful island of Barra, thank you very much.
Thank you, Alec. Great pleasure. Thank you.
And now to another Celtic nation. What do the results in Northern Ireland tell us about the future of the province? Alex asked former SDLP leader Alistair MacDonald.
Alistair, some interesting results in Northern Ireland, particularly this breakthrough of the Centre Ground Alliance Party.
Well, there's been certainly a lot of excitement here, and really this stemmed more from local government elections. The problem we have in Northern Ireland is that the lack of the Assembly and the general stagnation of politics has basically led people to be deeply frustrated. And this is particularly so at the liberal or common sense edge of unionism. And while a lot of unionism is drifting towards the DUP on the extremes, there's a large element of it has decided to give up on the Ulster Unionists and turn to the Alliance Party.
Alistair, in the absence of the Assembly, how does the dialogue between and among parties take place in Northern Ireland?
Well, in the absence of the Assembly, there is very little dialogue taking place. The business community do make an effort to try and create dialogue, and various other civic parts of society try to create dialogue. But, you know, the failure at Stormont, the failure at the Assembly is palpable. And
how about the change in Tory Prime Minister at Westminster? Is that likely to be good or bad for Northern Ireland? Could that help end the stalemate in the Assembly? I don't think the change of the leader of the Conservative Party will make any difference to us. Northern Ireland is feeling increasingly isolated and ignored by Westminster. And certainly the whole Brexit discussions have been relatively insensitive to Northern Ireland and Northern Ireland's needs. So changing the leader of the Conservative Party is not going to change the game, the rules, the challenges that we face. And in these changes that you see from these elections, north and south, do you see the ingredients of a movement of the political undergrowth in the island of Ireland? Well, I think that, you know, the Brexit has created a space on the island where basically people realise that nothing can quite ever be the same again. And the whole shock of Brexit, the whole implications of it, and whether we go through with Brexit or whether we retreat from it, the scene has changed and changed utterly. Well, I'll leave you with that resonant quote from Irish history. Alistair, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So to make sense of this extraordinary election, I'm delighted to be joined by former Liberal MP Lemba Opek, indeed former Liberal presidential candidate. So yes, what are we to make of this, Lemba? I mean, let's start with the big winners. The Brexit Party, led by Farage, the Liberal Democrats, your old party, and the Greens also had a good election. How do things stand for these three parties?
Strategically, what happened was polarisation. If you had a clear narrative, you did well. If you had a weak narrative, you did badly. Brexit Party, the clue's in the name. If you want a Brexit, that's where you go. And around 30% of the country did that. On the other side, as you say, the Lib Dems and to a slightly lesser extent the Greens said, we are the Remain party. There wasn't any ambiguity about it. And they polled a similar portion of the vote if you add the two together.
So did Nigel Farage benefit from having no manifesto, but the Liberals benefited by putting rude words on their manifesto?
Very controversial how they put those words forward, but it doesn't seem to have harmed them. We could have a theological debate about whether they would have done even better if they hadn't resorted to bad language. But the big picture here is Brexit on the one side, Remainers on the other, and they both made profound gains, 29 seats for a party which didn't even exist a couple of months ago in Brexit's case, and from 1 to 16 for the Lib Dems and 3 to 7 for Greens. Now, no one can deny those are tremendous results for those parties.
So we've dealt with the winners. How about the big losers, the Labour Party and the Conservatives, the old firm demolished in these elections?
For two different reasons. The Conservatives made a promise. The circular Brexit means Brexit didn't even turn out to be true. Theresa May spectacularly failed by her own, what we call in business, KPI, key performance indicator, just to get us out of the European Union. Whether you like that ambition or not, there's no denying that she's failed. And she's been punished for it big time. Lots of very angry Conservatives.
Not just failed, but gone before even the results were declared.
This was very worst of both worlds, after the election, but before the count. Now, if she'd done that 4 weeks ago, it might have been a little bit different, but she didn't, and we are where we are. The Conservatives have a big fright here, because if you did carry that vote across to the general election, then there's no doubt in that rather simplistic scenario, the Brexit Party would do well. Come back to that. In terms of Labour, different problem. They tried to go both ways. They admit they were trying to appeal to the 48% Remain and the 52% Brexit. You just can't do it. We're in a polarised environment. So they got punished for being wishy-washy, exactly what the Lib Dems used to be criticised for. So that polarisation has worked for a once vague party, the Lib Dems, and also for Brexit, and really, really slammed Labour and Conservative. The biggest losers, of course, being the Tories.
Yeah, a big Brexiteer is going to face problems. I mean, almost unnoticed over the weekend, the Chancellor of the Exchequer. The Chancellor of the Exchequer starts to speculate on the circumstances in which he might vote to bring down a Conservative government.
It's an extraordinary situation. Philip Hammond, who isn't known for his flamboyance or mercurial nature, is actually ominously suggesting that even he might not vote Conservative. Well, the alarm bells have to be ringing amongst the grandees. But this is the point, Alex. You've got two parties here which are completely stuck in the middle. The Conservatives ready to split towards Brexit and Remain, and having to fight that out with the leadership election, and Labour not even having the luxury of a leadership election because Jeremy Corbyn's pretty safe and sound. So Jeremy Corbyn paralysed in Parliament, the Conservative Party paralysed across the country, very smug Vince Cable somewhere in the Lib Dems, and Nigel Farage doing what he does best, playing blinders in general elections and then calling the shots, wagging the political dog.
So how about the other nations of these islands? Plaid Cymru beats Labour in Wales but comes second to Brexit. SNP's storm ahead in Scotland, and the Alliance Party make a breakthrough in Northern Ireland. What about the other nations of these islands?
Wales reflected England, a Brexit nation. Surprising to me that Brexit got 2 seats. Even more surprising, perhaps, that Plaid Cymru beat Labour. I'm not surprised the SNP did well. Their narrative was quite clear. They were very pro-Remain, and that worked well for the Greens, worked well for the Lib Dems, worked well for the SNP. That was the go-to party north of the border. And in Northern Ireland, a slightly different game being played there. What's exciting there is the Alliance Party, a non-sectarian party for the first time in its history, picked up a European seat. Now, far beyond just the Remain debate, that must have been a massive factor. It means you can get elected without coming from one of the tribes in Northern Ireland. Now, that bodes well for an instability we've been worried about, which is what happens with the backstop, what happens with the border. Enough people voted for a rational party there, a stable party, to say sectarianism doesn't always rule the roost.
So in a word, well, 2 words, you've got to answer 2 questions. Firstly, Scottish independence next year. And secondly, how does the UK political logjam get broken? Is it a referendum or a general election?
The first one, no referendum next year unless it becomes a bargaining chip in a forced general election. Otherwise, we'll have to wait for 5 years. In terms of referendum or general election, I don't think a referendum is a player here. I don't think a referendum would deliver a different result. It's got to be a general election, but that's a big mess. Nobody wants it. We're going to be waiting maybe till 2022. Why? Because Labour and the Conservatives can't string it out any longer. That's one to watch.
Lambert Obeck, thanks for clearing all that up.
My pleasure.
Is it possible to have a political revolution and no real change whatsoever? Is it possible to decimate both of the two great parties of state and still leave the political canvas essentially unaltered? 5 years ago, the success of the Farage-led UKIP in topping the Euro poll stampeded Tory Prime Minister David Cameron into promising a referendum, and the chaos which then ensued included his own political demise. This year, the Farage-led Brexit Party topped the Euro poll and finished the Tory Prime Minister May before the results were even declared, and will likely usher in a hard-line Tory Brexiteer to replace her. Meanwhile, the opposition Labour Party may move back to the comparative safety of the referendum pavement and out of the middle of the road, where they were being squashed by all sides. The Liberal revival will cheer up their troops, but more strategically. By squeezing out Change UK, they may have strangled at birth the prospects of political realignment. More MPs defecting to Change UK, hardly likely to happen now, was the best immediate chance of a serious parliamentary bridgehead in the centre ground. The SNP success in Scotland will heighten the calls for another independence referendum, but the question remains, how is one to be secured? These seem to be dramatic changes, but they all point to a continuing political stalemate, the inability to reach a deal with Brussels regardless of who becomes Prime Minister, but the refusal of Parliament to allow a no-deal Brexit. Thus, there will have to be a denouement in the autumn to break that deadlock, either by general election or by referendum. And here's the rub. If there is a referendum, then the indications are that both sides will be roughly equal in electoral strength, just more fixed in their opinions. If a general election it is to be, then the Leave side will likely not be led by the Brexit Party, but by the Tories. And the Remain side will likely not be led by the Liberals, but by Labour, the old firm decimated at these elections, resuscitated to fight once again. Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. Into this serene political landscape descends President Trump to ignite further unrest. Already his unofficial reception party is being prepared. So next week's show, we take a look at the politics of protest over the last century. And then with a great sporting event of Royal Ascot on the summer horizon, we'll take a look at the runners and riders in the Tory leadership stakes. Right now, there are just too many to get into the starting stalls. However, as the field thins out, we'll make some sense of it. But for now, from me, Alex, and all of the team here at the show, it's goodbye for now, and we hope to see you next week.